Hello YouTube and welcome back to Be a Loser. We've already discussed that T2D is fully reversible using natural dietary methods, but doctors and experts are still describing the disease as chronic and progressive, incurable. Now there's literature to support the statement that diabetes has been diagnosed as a disease for thousands of years. And as we also know, we didn't really begin to have a diabetes epidemic until the last 50 years or so. So this begs the question that if doctors have known about diabetes for thousands of years, and not until recently was it a true problem, well then what's changed? Why can't doctors cure diabetes? But to answer that question, we must once again walk through history to understand the origins of diabetes, its treatments, and the people that it benefits. As early as 1550 BC, diabetes mellitus was recognized as a disease. In the Egyptian medical text Ebers Papyrus, it was described as a condition involving the passing of too much urine. And in the Hindu texts of the same time, the disease was called madhume, which basically means honey urine. This came about when the urine of the patients who were wasting away attracted ants. By 250 BC, the Greek physician Apollonius of Memphis officially named the condition diabetes, which literally means to siphon through, referring to excessive urination. It was not until 1675 that Thomas Willis added the term mellitus, which means sweet. In the 1st century AD, the Greek physician Aretaeus of Cappadocia described type 1 diabetes as the melting down of flesh and limbs into urine. And this was in reality a very good description. T1D is characterized by excessive urination and a complete wasting of all tissue. The afflicted cannot gain weight no matter how hard they try. At the time, there was no treatment for this, and Aretaeus concluded that life with diabetes was short, disgusting, and painful. In 1776, an English physician named Matthew Dobson identified that the urine of diabetics was sweet due to sugar by tasting it, and that their blood was sweet from sugar by tasting it as well. That is gross. Then in 1797, a Scottish military surgeon, Dr. John Rollo, was the first to apply a dietary solution by treating the patients with an all-meat diet. The flip side of this, and there's always a contrary opinion, was a French physician, Pierre Priori, who advised patients to eat large amounts of sugar to replace what was being lost through the urine. A colleague of his who tried this method ended up dying. So you can figure for yourself which method was superior. During the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, Apollinaire Bouchardat, who is often called the founder of modern diabetology, created his own dietary intervention. He noticed that during the war there were periodic times of starvation, and this resulted in less sugar in the urine. He pointed out foods that should be forbidden to diabetics as sugars and starches. By 1889, Joseph von Mering and Oskar Minkowski identified the pancreas as the organ responsible for diabetes. Their studies, which might be offensive to some, in which they removed the pancreas from dogs, led rapidly to identical symptoms of diabetics. And finally, in 1910, Sir Edward Sharpie Schaefer determined that it was a deficiency of one hormone that was to blame. He named the hormone after the Latin word insula, which means island, because this hormone is produced in the islets of Langerhans in the pancreas. And of course, the hormone is known as insulin. In the same year, Frederick Madison Allen created a dietary guideline that was widely considered the best therapy before the discovery of insulin. This diet, known as the Allen starvation treatment, was very low in calories, less than 1,000 per day, and very restricted in carbohydrates, less than 10 grams per day. Patients that were admitted to a hospital were treated with black coffee and whiskey, of all things, every 2 hours from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. This treatment unfortunately led to many type 1 diabetics dying, which was typical of the disease even without intervention. But it led to dramatic improvement in type 2 diabetics. Due to this, Dr. Allen became the director of diabetes research at the Rockefeller Institute. And so successful was this treatment that Dr. Elliot Joslin in 1916 wrote that temporary periods of undernutrition are helpful in the treatment of diabetes will probably be acknowledged by all after these 2 years of experience with fasting. Or maybe not. In 1921, Frederick Banting, Charles Best, and John MacLeod isolated and purified insulin from the pancreases of bovines and gave it to a Leonard Thompson in 1922. This 14-year-old type 1 diabetic was only 65 pounds when he was started on insulin. His symptoms rapidly disappeared. Due to this, 6 more patients were treated with similarly amazing results. The average lifespan of a 10-year-old diagnosed with T1D went from 1.3 years to 35 years. A truly life-altering discovery. Eli Lilly and Company partnered with the University of Toronto to commercially develop insulin. Banting and Best opted to make the patent free to all so that patients could benefit. By fall of 1923, 25,000 patients were being treated with injected insulin. Not surprisingly, Banting and MacLeod received the Nobel Prize in 1923 as a result of this discovery. It was widely believed that a cure for diabetes had been discovered, and new types of insulin were being developed. This discovery caused any dietary treatments for diabetes to fade away. Even so, it was clear that there were 2 types of diabetics. Sir Harold Percival Hemsworth in 1936, as well as Dr. Joslin in 1948, made it quite clear that diabetics were divided into 2 separate groups, and that one of those, type 2 diabetics, were going undiagnosed because insulin could not treat them. By 1959, the 2 diabetic types were formally recognized. Type 1 or insulin-dependent diabetics, and type 2 or non-insulin dependent. By 2003, the monikers of insulin dependence were dropped. Also dropped were the juvenile and adult onset monikers, as type 1 may occur in adults and type 2 was becoming more common in children. And here we are today, in the midst of the T2D epidemic, when arguably we were far better off in the 1800s. Back then, type 1 was the dominant form of diabetes and most times fatal. Today it's easily treated with insulin, and type 2 diabetes is growing in epic proportions. In China, the number of T2D cases has gone from 1% in 1980 to 11.6% in 2010. That's a 1,160% increase in 30 years. In 2012, the American Diabetes Association estimated the cost of diabetes in the U.S. to be $245 billion. 14.3% of adults in the U.S. have T2D. But if you combine that number with those diagnosed as pre-diabetic, then the number reaches a whopping 52.3%. Over half of the U.S. population is suffering in some form from T2D. So why are we so inept at curing T2D? Well, the issue is that both type 1 and type 2 diabetes are marked by increased blood sugars. Lack of insulin production is the primary cause of T1D, and thus the discovery and administering of insulin is the proper treatment. However, T2D, as we know, is caused by insulin resistance, and this IR is the result of diet, meaning T2D is a dietary disease. So it seems obvious that you would treat T2D with dietary intervention instead of pharmaceuticals. But since the cause of type 1 and the symptom of type 2 are the same, high blood sugars, and modern medical professionals tend towards using drugs, doctors began treating both types with insulin. In the past 10 years, the number of patients on insulin increased by 50%, and nearly 1/3 of patients with diabetes are on insulin. However, 90 to 95% of diabetics in the U.S. are type 2 diabetics, and according to the CDC, 85.3% of patients were using medications or insulin for their diabetes. So simply put, doctors are treating a disease of too much insulin, T2D, with more insulin. This is like treating an alcoholic with more alcohol. Or as Dr. Fung puts it, it's kind of like washing clothes by putting them in water and drying clothes by also putting them in water. Up until the 1990s, it was unclear if high blood sugar was bad for you. Certainly, short-term, low blood sugar was far more concerning. From 1999 to 2011, about 404,000 individuals were hospitalized for low blood sugar, but only 280,000 were hospitalized for high blood sugar. In a study in 1993 published in the New England Journal of Medicine, 1,441 T1D patients were randomized into 2 groups with either standard glucose control, 1 to 2 daily injections, or tight glucose control, 3 to 4 injections daily. The follow-up was 6.5 years. In the tight control patients, retinal disease decreased 76%, kidney disease decreased 50%, and nerve damage decreased 60%. At the end of the trial, the effects of this tight glucose control were largely unknown. So in 2005, the EDIC trial was also published in the NEJM, and it followed the same group of patients for 17 years. They weren't treated, so both groups had similar blood glucose control from year 6.5 to year 17. During this time, the risk of CVD was reduced by 50%. This established that the toxicity of T1D is in the high blood sugars, glucotoxicity, and giving insulin controlled this well. However, nearly 1/3 of those in the high insulin dosage group suffered from severe weight gain. Now, in the late 90s, there was concern in the medical community over this weight gain. The group with the greatest weight gain went from a BMI of 24 to 31 during their treatment period. Better stated, they went from normal weight to obese through the treatment of their high blood sugars. The majority of the weight was put on in the abdomen, and coupled with high blood pressure and high cholesterol, these type 1 diabetics were showing signs of metabolic syndrome, which is typically seen in type 2 diabetics. So over the time of the EDIC study, the high insulin group saw increased arterial plaque buildup and increased CIMT, a measure of the thickness of blood vessel walls. These are both accepted measures of increased risk of CVD. And even worse, those same patients showed increases in blood pressure and cholesterol. So in the short term, about 10 years, this shows us that glucotoxicity is the main problem. However, over the long term, as you take more and more insulin, you develop the problem associated with T2D. It's the insulin that has become toxic. But all of the negative effects of diabetes, whether type 1 or type 2, were associated with high blood sugars, and so modern medical treatment was the same, more and more insulin. But unlike T1D, T2D is a disease of too much insulin. So what effect might one expect when giving insulin to someone whose insulin is already too high? Well, that's a secondary question to a medical professional. The number one question is how to lower glucotoxicity, and that means prescribing insulin. Now, if you recall, Dr. Banting chose to license insulin without a patent, so it would be easily available to everyone. But insulin is incredibly expensive. So why is that? Well, only 3 pharmaceutical companies in the US manufacture insulin: Eli Lilly, Sanofi, and Novo Nordisk. In 2012, it was estimated that insulin alone cost $6 billion to the United States healthcare system. And in 2013, the best-selling drug for diabetes was Lantus, which is a long-lasting form of insulin. It is, in fact, the 5th best-selling drug worldwide. This drug alone accounts for over $7.5 billion worldwide. And let's not forget that insulin was discovered in 1921, nearly 100 years ago. And still, it remains the best drug to treat diabetes. And not just that, out of the top 10 diabetes drugs, different forms of insulin rank 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, and 10. Occasionally, the insulin molecule is tweaked slightly, which allows for new patents. This keeps cheaper generic medications from taking control of the market. And while controlling the market, these new insulins can become more expensive. From 2010 to 2015, the price of new insulins rose from 168% to 325%. Now, shortly after the discovery of insulin, the medication metformin was discovered in 1922. By 1929, its effect of lowering blood sugar had been demonstrated in animals, but not yet tested in humans. It wasn't FDA approved in the US until 1994, but is the number 1 prescribed medication for diabetes today. Now, the drug class sulfonylurea was discovered in 1942. By 1984, a second generation of SUs were released in the US. As we know, this class of drugs stimulates the pancreas to release more insulin. They have many side effects, including severe hypoglycemia. So for a very long time, these 2 classes of drug, metformin and SUs, were the only oral medication available to treat diabetes. Early on, these drugs didn't make much money for drug companies because there simply were not many people needing treatment. But luckily for them, the dietary guidelines in the US were changed in 1977, and the high-carb, low-fat recommended diet began the diabetes epidemic. Even better for drug companies was that in 1997, the ADA lowered the blood sugar definition for diabetes. This had the effect of making 1.9 million more Americans diabetic. And continuing this trend, in 2003, the definition of pre-diabetes was changed, and this would make 25 million more Americans pre-diabetic. Now, with all these people falling under the diagnosis of pre-diabetic and diabetic, the business model for oral diabetes medication changed completely. Most people believe that pre-diabetes is best treated with lifestyle change. But of course, the current medical mindset is to treat everything with drugs. As we know from earlier in this video, these new definitions of diabetes now have over half the US population as diabetic or pre-diabetic. From 2004 to 2013, at least 30 new diabetes drugs entered the market. By 2015, diabetes drug sales reached $25 billion. While all these drugs are good at lowering blood sugars, they do nothing to address CVD, blindness, or other complications of diabetes. But this entire industry is founded on lowering blood sugar instead of treating the actual cause of the disease, insulin resistance. As we've seen, the altered guidelines for diabetes added 46 million adults, and then in 2010, HbA1c was added to the definition of diabetes. Now, this by itself doesn't seem particularly ominous. After all, HbA1c levels can help to diagnose and treat diabetes early. However, the panel that voted to make this change to the definition of diabetes had 9 of its 14 members working for pharmaceutical companies that manufactured diabetes medication. In 2008, a joint statement was released by the American College of Endocrinology and the American Association of Clinical Endocrinologists. This statement urged physicians to consider drug treatments for at-risk pre-diabetics, even though no drug had been approved by the FDA. 13 of the 17 members of the panel were paid as speakers and consultants to diabetes drug companies. And not coincidentally, in that year, those members received $8 million from Big Pharma. In 2013, these groups advocated very strongly for drug use in patients who were not seeing results through lifestyle changes. 13 of the 19 doctors on that panel, including the chairman, were paid consultants, speakers, or advisors to pharmaceutical companies. They had been paid $2.1 million since 2009 by Big Pharma. So maybe we're being overly paranoid here. I mean, obviously, if drug companies want us to use drugs for prediabetes, then they must help us, right? Nope. First off, none of the drugs used for prediabetes are FDA approved. And why would this be? Well, because they don't work. Diabetes screening has been shown to be almost completely useless with current medications. Those medications treat high blood sugar, but we know that this is treating the symptom. They don't treat the actual cause of T2D, insulin resistance. The current treatment does not remove sugar from the body. It only moves the blood sugar from the blood into the tissue, where it's far more harmful. Screening only leads to better outcomes if the drugs are then effective, and we know that they're not. Dietary intervention, if done correctly, is effective, but instead we use a set of drugs that cost us billions of dollars yearly that are completely ineffective. And this is why there is not a cure, and will not be a cure from the medical community. There's far too much money in creating these drugs to stop and tell people that they can simply change how they eat and be cured. And to perpetuate this, pharmaceutical companies fund research, pay for private school tuition, and sponsor diabetes events, not to mention the speakers at those events. And while they're making billions, it's the community of diabetics who are truly paying the price. And that price is blindness, amputations, organ failure, and death. Why is there no cure for type 2 diabetes? Because no one makes money if there is. We'll end the video there, but not our fight. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe so you'll be alerted when new videos post. And be sure to click the bell to enable alerts so that you're alerted when new videos post. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Be a Loser Today, as well as our website, bealoser.today. We've actually implemented a new website design, so be sure to head over there and bookmark it. And if you liked this video, consider clicking that like button to help us gain more exposure. And please, share the video with your family and friends if you found it helpful. You can click the video thumbnails at the end of this video to watch the history of the American diet video and our introduction to intermittent fasting. As always, thank you very much for watching. And until next time, keep being a loser.